Um, so we want to take a minute just to thank our partners who contributed funding support to the Business School Survey. So this initiative started back in 2022. Since then, we've had the funding contribution of Luminary academic members. So there was 24 academic institutions from across the country that joined the academic membership program. And part of that revenue was used to fund the early stages of this Indigenous engagement survey. We also had a contribution from the Royal Bank of Canada and from SSHRC. So there was collaboration for reconciliation and action, and SSHRC put in $10,000 towards this initiative with the Sprott School of Business and Luminary. So that was a joint project. And last but not least, we have a significant amount of funding from the Government of Canada. So the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development under the Strategic Science Fund has provided us with funding for the next 5 years. So this started in 2024. It'll run till 2029. So we want to thank all of our partners who are helping make this possible today. So today you'll be hearing from my colleagues, and so there's Dr. Tasha Brooks. She'll be joining us a little bit later. She is the senior research lead at Luminary, and she will be giving insights on the research findings. We have Kelly Lendsay, who's the chief transformation officer here at Luminary, myself, and from Malatest we have Derek Hughes, but we also have Daniela Garcia, who will be running through the findings of the survey. So we're happy to be with you here today and looking forward to getting into it. So a little bit about our agenda. We're going to go through the business school engagement survey value proposition. We're going to walk you through a little bit of the history in terms of the business school survey working group that has helped frame this survey. We'll have a presentation from Malatest that'll walk you through the data that was collected in the survey, and then we'll provide some discussions between Kelly and Tasha on the observations that we're looking at or that we're seeing as a result of the survey findings. We'll wrap up with a conversation about what's next and what you can expect to hear from Luminary and see over the next coming months, and then we'll open up the floor for questions and discussion. So why an Indigenous engagement survey? So this is the first national engagement scan that provides insights into the current state of Indigenous engagement, the needs, issues, and challenges that business schools face as they design, develop, or enhance their Indigenous engagement practices, programs, and strategies. So this has never been done before. It's the first time that we have any type of data like this collected across the country. The report will support academic institutions at all stages of development. So whether you're just getting started or you're further down the road and you're looking to grow and expand your Indigenous engagement strategies and initiatives, this will help shed some light on best practices, what's working, and where the opportunities are. The findings will also assist Luminary in designing the programs and services to support business schools in their efforts to engage in advanced knowledge, curriculum, talent, and research with Indigenous businesses, communities, and people. So like I mentioned, since 2023, there was a group of over 20 academics and experts from different institutions across the country that participated in the Luminary Survey Working Group. So they were responsible for the design of the questions and the survey to ensure that there was a full picture of what we're looking to capture in this first survey of its kind. So thank you to that working group that we are still going to be involved with, and we'll be going back to them shortly when we have the full report to do a deeper dive into that. And then, so like I mentioned, we will be working with the working group to do a deeper dive and identify opportunities, synergies, and further research. And we're looking to finalize the survey report later this fall. So right now we just have the insights, very high level overview of what we're seeing, and the official report will be released later this fall. So now I'm going to introduce Derek and Daniela from Malatest, who are going to walk us through their findings and data for this. Derek and Daniela.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll turn it over to Daniela, but good afternoon all. Happy to be here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Terri, Lynn. So we will dive a little bit on the survey, which was responded by 48 business schools. 18 of those were colleges or polytechnics, and 30 were universities. So one of the questions that we asked was about if their business school track Indigenous diversity. 43% of the schools effectively track metrics independently or in addition to their institutions. Methods, 34% track metrics on faculty, researcher, or instructors, a little less on non-teaching staff. 34% is that don't know or is uncertain about if their school track those metrics. So we also ask about, for those schools that tracks metrics, what are the number of Indigenous students in business school? From that, we obtain the proportion of those Indigenous schools from the total students. So for the total Indigenous students, most schools have 3% of their enrollment. Also 3% in undergrads, a little bit like 2.8 and 3 a little bit over 3 point something. And for Indigenous master students, they have about 4% of their total enrollment and 1% of Indigenous doctoral students. In the same way, if you want to see a little bit more about how this is distributed, most schools have less than 2% Indigenous students, and 2 schools reported to have a proportion of 10% or more. If we want to go to the next slide, thank you. And about Indigenous engagement in business schools, 68% of schools have prior or ongoing Indigenous research projects. 60% have formal or informal Indigenous partnerships. 53% offer core courses with Indigenous contents inside their business schools. And 48% offer Indigenous courses specifically. Also, 48% formally responded to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to actions. The question itself was, has your business school formally responded to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action? And 32% have support programs or services as part of their school programming. And finally, 17% have Indigenous student groups. And the next slides, we dive a little bit on the types of research projects being conducted. From most of schools that reported research projects, they are conducting management research and community-based research. Also important were applied research and policy research. And a little bit about the number of Indigenous courses offered across business schools. We have the chart on the left. You can see that most schools offer between 1 and 5 Indigenous focus courses, and very few schools offer more. Only 2 schools have between 6 and 10 courses, and another 2 schools have between 11 and 15 courses. And then we have 3 schools that reported to have more than 20 courses. And on the right, we can see that a small group offer more than 20 core courses with Indigenous content. And we also see that 5 most schools offer between 1 and 5 core courses with Indigenous content, and just 1 school offer more than 20 research projects. So Indigenous engagement cannot be explained by a single factor. So here's where factors such as regional differences and institutional differences play a role in Indigenous engagement, because it can manifest differently depending on the context. In this case, regional or institutional differences may shape the adoption of strategies, the proportion of Indigenous students in business schools, of the number of Indigenous courses of research projects. For example, we can see Indigenous strategies in schools by type of institution. So for business schools that are within universities, over half of 59% of business schools have incorporated Indigenous strategies into broader frameworks, while 15% have a standalone strategy, 14%, I'm sorry, and 5%, 7% report having both. We can see in contrast, colleges have mostly incorporated into broader institutional strategies with 15%. Another example we can see in if they track or not diversity in schools by type of institutions, the same thing as with student metrics are tracked mostly in universities, and the same with faculties and non-teaching staff. Colleges, in contrast, are less likely to track their metrics independently or in addition to their broader college institution. So you can see that the percentages are relatively smaller to compare to universities, and the uncertainty is higher at 43%. And the same with region, for example, we have some differences between the West and the East in the proportion of Indigenous students. So Western institutions are enrolling more Indigenous students overall, proportionally through both regions show limited Indigenous representation in business schools, as you probably know. And there are also some differences in the offering of Indigenous courses. We can see also the West have reported more offering Indigenous courses than the East. Now we dive a little bit on what is expecting from Luminary. So if we wanted to look into the various interests that the respondents have in Luminary initiatives, we can see that the most important or the most mentioned was curriculum forums at the 70%. 68% of the respondents also mentioned knowledge networks, followed by conferences, seminars, and workshops. A little less were interested in research collaborations and sectoral networks. Part of the next step asking in the survey was the respondents show interest in expanding their knowledge of Indigenous engagement, networking, and research is consistently high in all questions, so interest is very high. For all the respondents, and a majority of institutions would like to participate in Luminary initiatives. I think you are mute.
Sorry about that. I was thanking you for sharing those observations with us. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Lendsay to offer some of Luminary's early observations, and he'll be joined in a few minutes by Dr. Tasha Brooks. So let's get into the conversation. Kelly, over to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. I'm speaking from Treaty 6 in the Métis homeland of Saskatchewan. And there it is. You've got some initial early insights on some of the numbers, and there's going to be more work done with the working group as we digest this. But I want to shift now from the numbers to look at, well, what story is it telling? What are we learning about partnerships, curriculum, and research? And so those are the three that we're going to touch on in this webinar today. And I think it's important because as we look at this, I think that we had 48 respondents, about an equal number of colleges and universities. But like I said, the beauty of a benchmark is that it now probes even more questions in terms of where and the types of things that we should be exploring. Perhaps people misunderstood certain things when they responded and they want to elaborate, and I'll give some examples. So let's start with the first storyline around partnerships. Now I'm on my phone, so just confirm we've got the slide up with business school and Indigenous partnerships. Maybe I can just move my, oh, there it is, good. So there were four schools that reported partnerships with Indigenous corporations. So there were three that had one, and one in northern BC actually had a partnership with three Indigenous economic development corporations. Now these Indigenous economic development corporations, just to understand them, they're sort of like the public crown corporations by First Nations, Métis, Inuit. They run between 5 and 10 businesses. There's more than 500, and they're generating billions in the economy, and they're employing hundreds of thousands of people. In terms of Indigenous entrepreneurs, one was clearly identified. I'll go back to the previous slide. So one Indigenous entrepreneur was acknowledged. There was two Indigenous economic and finance organizations. There was four what we would call service organizations, and there was three projects or partners that were identified from post-secondary Indigenous institutions. So that's what you reported. The next slide. This is the landscape in Canada. As I mentioned, there are 500 Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and economic development corporations. There's more than 75,000 to 100,000 Indigenous businesses, and it's growing about 8% a year. So strong growth in entrepreneurship. We have more than 50 national Indigenous organizations in the what I would call the finance business space. So it's First Nations Finance Authority, Canadian Council for Indigenous Business, AFOA, Canadian Council for Indigenous Business. The list goes on, CANDO and others. We have thousands of organizations in the provincial and national service space, and there are 55 Indigenous controlled institutions across Canada. So that shows you the opportunity here to really engage more with between business schools and this landscape. Okay, on the next slide, we're going to switch to curriculum here. So you heard the numbers from Daniela, and emphasis on graduate. I think there was a total of 48 courses, and many of you, 3/4, 78%, said that you plan to develop more courses. So as we look to this, how do we expand the reach of curriculum? And there was a number of you that reported that you actually had curriculum episodes in mainstream, which I think we'll get to next year. But there's an opportunity here to really bring the Indigenous business issues and what's happening in this landscape into the classroom. Next slide is, we looked at, and she reported on who led and who teaches this course. So the challenge, of course, is there simply is a lack of Indigenous faculty. There's less than 20 Indigenous PhDs and DBAs. So we need more faculty and staff. But looking at who's developing this, there's opportunities here to create teams of people, to look at how we can accelerate curriculum development, how we can sort of look at who teaches it. How can we create teaching support systems? How can we use open source learning? So it's really probing more questions, but we're building from a good base of you folks who reported the courses and how you're actually inserting curriculum episodes into mainstream. So there's an opportunity here to create a curriculum network of people that are really passionate about this and look at how we can expand this across Canada. I would also point out, let's go to the next one, it was interesting to sort of look at where are the courses. So there was 8 courses that are an introduction or an overview to Indigenous business, 7 in the area of leadership and management, 5 in public admin, 4 in governance, 3 in entrepreneurship. So again, as we look to the future, there are things like international business. There may be some out there, but none were reported in terms of Indigenous people in the Indigenous business world, I think would make for a great course. We have content like the new National Indigenous Economic Strategy, which was created by Indigenous organizations and leaders that has 107 calls to prosperity. That, you've heard me speak about this before. This document, the National Indigenous Economic Strategy, is the type of curriculum that could be inserted into many courses or every course across Canada. So I'm just checking, Terri Lynn, has Tasha Brooks, Dr. Brooks, been able to join us? Tremendous.
Here, yes.
So Tasha, you and I have been speaking about curriculum and the importance of it in terms of not just being relevant for Indigenous students, but also for all students, and how it could actually be a catalyst for research, how it could be a catalyst for partnerships and bring real relevance to truth and reconciliation benefits. Can you just elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think this poses a real opportunity for business schools. We're all wanting to move towards that $100 billion Indigenous economy, and that takes participation from everybody. So the more courses that we have in this domain, I think that provides that opportunity for not only non-Indigenous students to learn about this, but we're going to need to be working together. And what a better place to start that teamwork than in the classroom.
The great thing about this is that many people could be finding themselves working in the Indigenous domain with the fast growth in our economies and communities. And of course, in this post-war, post-Trump era or Trump era with tariffs, I think the opportunity for growth and looking at how do we grow curriculum that's going to bring the Indigenous priorities into focus. And that's sort of the next slide, Tasha. Let's go to the next one, which is, this does look at Indigenous content in mainstream courses. So there was a good number, and as Daniela pointed out, on average, 20% or 22%, but it ranged from 5% up to 50%. But the point, what I like about this particular story is this. There is real merit in having what I would call curriculum episodes inserted into mainstream. For example, you've heard about, the Clearwater seafood purchase, the Mi'kmaq First Nations buying $1 billion into Clearwater Seafoods. But what's really fascinating is how it was financed with the First Nations Finance Authority. So the finance people could be looking in finance at how the whole financing mechanism and how they're using bond dollar, cheaper capital. They've now invested $1.3 billion into different First Nation activities throughout Canada. So to me, these episodes, we could be coming up and supporting the creation of those. So it's a plug and play. And Tasha, you've seen that in real time, and it's had real impact.
Yeah, for sure. In my business education, I had never had an Indigenous curriculum episode through my BBA and MBA. So when I see this number, it's really inspiring to see that it's at 22% and hopefully will be growing.
There was one respondent, and I can say his name publicly in the institution, Carrie Godfrey, the dean at Dillon Business School in Lethbridge. They have a mandatory course for business students. Now, there are many universities that actually have a mandatory Indigenous course, Indigenous awareness course, but the Carey School has it for the business students. Now, there might be others, we don't know, but of those that reported. But again, what's interesting is delving into the application of Indigenous knowledge around economies, well-being, business growth, looking at social economy, those types of things, again, could really enrich the curriculum for all students. So I think, folks, that gives you a shading on, partnerships, we looked at curriculum. There's an opportunity here to create these curriculum networks. And so to summarize these observations, there are opportunities for knowledge mobilization. We have networks of people and speakers and examples and award winners that could be integrated into episodes and into courses. There's strong interest in course development. So those of you that are producing courses and those of you that would like to be part of that, Tasha is organizing a curriculum network and we'll be reaching out to you. You can join that network. And we're going to be looking at faster ways to accelerate curriculum development with Indigenous informed leadership at the table. Innovation and ideation appears to be absent. And in this world, we need innovation. And innovation, there was 2 subject areas in research, actually out of Quebec, that actually referenced at the University of Laval innovation. But topics like artificial intelligence, trade, the commercialization of research, this is where we need to bring Indigenous people and content into the classroom. And then again, looking at new models. What are ways that we could accelerate curriculum development, economize, create some economies of scale, and really look at how to support and create knowledge sharing in our business schools. So we're going to go to the third storyline, the last one, which is around research. Tash, over to you to talk about this.
Yeah, so I find this slide particularly fascinating. We had about 38 respondents that identified they are engaging in Indigenous research. And so it ranged from receiving $3,000 in research funding to up to $1.9 million. And so that averaged about $270,000. But when we took the outliers out of the responses, so the top 2 projects were removed, it was on average about $104,000 in research funding received for these projects.
So, and they ranged from $3,000, right? 20 and all, it covered the spectrum. And what's really, I think the most interesting part though, is the type of things that you are researching. So what we heard is that there was a significant amount of research being done in the area of education, some on economy generally, and workforce. And I would say it was more social economy. And then there was 2 or 3 on entrepreneurship and what's the last one there? Marketing. And marketing and data, marketing and data sovereignty. So it was quite interesting. So in terms of research, what we think is happening is that the colleges did not report a lot in terms of research, but I know personally that there is a lot of applied research happening in colleges and polytechnics across this country. And the same thing at business schools. There might be more research happening, maybe not directly, of course, in the business school, but with your vice president of research and innovation. Just this morning, I was meeting with Kristen Craig, who's the business dean at SAS Polytechnic Business School. And I raised this with her, and she said, yes, we have research and innovation. We have what they call this DICE center, but they are doing work in the area of drones, digital twinning, AI, robotics, cybersecurity, not directly under the business school, but within SAS Polytechnic. So again, as we go forward, how are business schools working with the innovation and research centers at our different institutions? And what are the potential linkages that we could be creating there? So we need to see and want to see, I'll tell you one last story. I was walking down the hallway at the University of Laval, and Frank Pons is the dean there at the business school, and there was a professor on the wall with a poster that said AI in tourism, artificial intelligence in tourism. And here's an opportunity to say, were Indigenous businesses involved in that research, and vice versa? What do Indigenous businesses know, especially in tourism, about AI? So it uncovers, I think, new areas to expand existing research and looking at how we can play in technology, AI, and others. So we have one more, I think, one more slide on in terms of this research theme, just to sort of summarize on the next slide is in terms of research partners, 4 cited specific First Nation communities, 3 cited or 4 cited NGOs and service organizations, 1 entrepreneur, and people Tasha mentioned, students, graduates, and faculty. What are your thoughts on where we go with this area?
I think, this shows that there is a huge opportunity here in terms of research. There is, I would say, many communities like my own that, have some capacity issues. We only have one person working in certain areas that need to be supportive. And I think having research partnerships can directly support some initiatives that the First Nation communities are looking at. Indigenous entrepreneurs may be wanting to have supported as well. And there's always opportunities to support Indigenous and graduate students through research.
Tasha, we're seeing, let's go to the sort of the summary of our storyline here with observations. And as we said, strong focus on workforce education, some economic resources, but emerging opportunities in things like agri-food, AI, energy. Martin Scallon is the Dean of Agriculture at the University of Manitoba. Andrew Bedard at University of Saskatchewan is the Ag Dean. What are the opportunities for business school deans and agriculture to look at how do we become the world food basket? And you hear a lot about this in terms of Prime Minister Carney's positioning on national projects. Where can Canada be a leader? And food is certainly one of them. We're the growing belt for many of the foods. And what are the future foods that we could be growing and providing, and looking again at research and commercialization of that research. I think number 2 is engagement models. So look, we have an opportunity to really engage the Indigenous side and the academic side. And it's going to take a lot of more effort to do that, because there is this gap. But therein lies the opportunity, Tasha, like you said, with your own community to engage them. Talk about professional development, number 3, Tasha.
I think professional development, is always on the radar at institutions, faculty members. We do get a certain amount of funds to engage in professional development each year. And I think that understanding some of the results from this survey, there might be some opportunities to engage in professional development activities, around curriculum, or how do we even begin building relationships with these Indigenous entrepreneurs, with these community members that might want our research support.
I think, and that sort of leads to the last point, is really Luminary's role in, fostering curriculum partnerships, research, and how are we going to build the competitiveness of our Indigenous businesses, our economic development corporations, our innovators. And we can do so much with you folks in the academic community around the research and innovation agenda. And I would just sort of conclude with if you look to other countries, if you look to the Dutch, they developed what they call the triple helix for innovation and to really accelerate AI. And really the triple helix was 3 key partners: business, the academic community, and government. And that's what, in some ways, Luminary is like the triple helix. It's about Indigenous business, it's about the academic community, and it's about government. And they would do things like it created data sharing pools, they had faster knowledge mobilization and sharing. And so I think some of those lessons are exactly the types of things that Tasha and Terri Lynn is going to speak to. Some of the webinars and seminars and forums that we have planned and are rolling out are going to facilitate that triple helix concept. And that's really where Luminary sees providing support. I think the connecting and raising the awareness amongst the Indigenous business community, is obviously a major thrust that's going to be rolling out this fall. And as we do this, we're going to build upon the partnerships and the work that you folks have reported in this survey. And next year, if you didn't participate, you'll be able to join then. And again, we're going to be able to continue to create this benchmark. So I think, Terri, Lynn, that sort of gives, from Tesh and I, sort of a storyline about what we are seeing. And we're going back to the Luminary working group. We're going to be giving them the data, and we're going to be delving further so that when we do reproduce the report, it will be data along with real observations, implications, opportunities, and where we can move this trajectory forward for Indigenous innovation. So back to you.
Thank you guys so much for your insights and sharing your experiences and wisdom on this subject. I'm really excited. As an MBA student myself, I see so much potential there for the academic institutions to bring the value and what Indigenous knowledge has to offer, and especially in business courses. I think that that's very connected. There are a couple of questions in the chat. If you have any more to add, please do that. I'm going to get to them next. But before I do that, I just want to touch a little bit on what you can expect from Luminary and what you can keep your eyes open for, and how you can connect with us over the coming weeks and months. So one of the things that we launched in just this last month was our academic membership program. Well, we relaunched it. It was launched a couple of years ago, but we relaunched it, and we have already a number of institutions that are joining. So we're really encouraged by that and very happy. And if you want to learn more about it, we're going to drop the information into the chat for you to have a peek. And feel free to get in touch with us. But what we're going to be doing is regular monthly webinars. So such as this, some of them will be public, but some of them will be exclusive for our members, and where we're going to take deeper dives. Now we're talking a lot about professional development and getting that knowledge about, you know, what the importance is of working with Indigenous communities. Where do we start? How do we begin? How do we get those conversations going? So we are going to, like next month in October, our next webinar is going to be on October 15th, and we're going to be talking about strengthening the engagement between Indigenous businesses and academic institutions, to give you an idea of what's coming. We're also going to do some seminars for our academic members that will do a deeper dive into, like if you want to start building indigenized curriculum, pedagogy, what do you need to do if you want to develop a robust Indigenous engagement strategy, and how can we provide supports for that to help you, you know, reach your goals, whatever they may be. Because we recognize that all of the institutions are not coming in at the same space. And then we're going to, on our website, there's a platform you can register and become a Luminary collaborator. And on that space, it's a free space to join. And we will be having networks that are going to be established. So if you have an interest in talking about, you know, Indigenous businesses or getting to know them, if you want to talk about research potential, or you're looking for an opportunity to partner on a research project that you have, we'll be able to have that space to make those connections. So we're really excited to launch that and get that going and get our numbers up there. So again, it's on our website. You can go there and register. There'll be curriculum networks and research networks that are coming down the pipes fairly quick. And you can expect to see some supporting webinars, seminars, and networks to talk about that more. Another big project that we're working on right now is the Indigenous Innovation Summit that will be co-hosted with McGill University and Desautol Faculty of Management. That's going to be held in September of 2026, so just about a year away from now. But we're really excited for this partnership with McGill. And what we're going to be doing at the Indigenous Innovation Summit is similar to the one that we had in Phoenix, Arizona earlier this year, where we bring together academic deans, professors, Indigenous knowledge holders, businesses, economic development or corporations, where we can come together and have conversations, create projects, and actually get some results and get something out of it, where we're moving the needle and we're taking things further, so that next year when you do your not next year, but in 2027, when you participate in the survey, you'll have some great activity and projects to work on. And we're also going to be inviting those that have done research with Indigenous communities and partners to come and talk about their experiences and share what they've learned. So it's going to be a really interesting event. So keep that in the back of your mind if you have some dollars for travel for next September and you want to go to beautiful Montreal. We'll be providing a lot more information about that. So I did mention the October 15th, 2026 webinar. So that's next month. And where you can follow and find all of the information about everything that we're going to be doing is on our LinkedIn network. So we have a LinkedIn, it's called Luminary Network. I encourage you all to go and like and follow and share as you can so that we can get more participants on there. It's a new network, so we're looking to grow it. And then another initiative that we just completed is our 2024-25 Luminary Annual Report. So that'll be dropped into the link, the chat for you to take a look at as well. But we're really proud about the work that we've done in the last year and how far the organization has come with the support and the collaboration of all of you here today. So thank you very much for that. I will go to the questions, but before I do that, let me just go to the next slide. We have a poll. If you can just take a moment to scan the QR code and answer, it's just one question. But if you could take a moment to do that while I address some of the questions, that would be great. So I see there's a question here from Jacqueline, and it's for you, Daniela. And it was to ask about the split between the West and the East.
Yes. So in the West, we have Alberta, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and in the East, we have the Maritimes, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Labrador, Nova Scotia, Ontario, Prince Edward Island, and Quebec. And we don't have any respondents from the North.
Perfect.
And I would just add that we can, and as you can imagine, Jacqueline, if you start to, we did have respondents, of course, Ontario, Quebec, the Maritimes, universities versus colleges and polytechnics, but the sample size is small, right? So you can't really sort of draw correlations and those inferences. That's why we're calling it observations, right? Yeah, that information, Jacqueline's on the Luminary working group for the survey. You'll have access to all that to make some observations, like however you're going to take this data and play with it. So
I was just surprised because I believe we do have a PhD student at our institution, but it wasn't showing up in the East. So it might be that whoever filled out the survey was not aware of that.
Could be, yes. And like you said, like a good survey, it makes people go back to say, well, how did we enter the data, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's the first time, but it's a good start, right?
But it doesn't surprise me that the West is more advanced than the Eastern universities either. So.
Well, and I'll give one quick shout out to you, Jacqueline, you, Laval, and the work of Sophie Demure, your rectress, your president. It was the only research that actually mentioned the word innovation, digital innovation, in all the research projects we saw, right? So, and what does Canada need? Innovation. Yeah. So good work.
Thank you.
For sure. I know a couple of PhDs myself that I don't see reflected in the data. So again, huge opportunity to get more institutions engaged and get a better picture for next year, but this is a good start. So this next question I'll pose to all of you, feel free to jump in, but they're asking, can you describe and characterize Indigenous courses? So for example, the percentage of course content that includes Indigenous knowledge or Indigenous business cases.
Well, I'll take the first shot, and then maybe Tasha, you can add some color context to it. What we received in the survey was a description, like the title and a description of the course. And so there were courses around business issues, exploring business, Indigenous business. Now, they didn't say which businesses, so they didn't delve down. But if that's the type of thing that we could go back to those people to say, could we learn more about which businesses were you working with? Who do you profile? So we went through this, the Luminary Working Group, and Derek, you remember this, we had to make a decision. How deep do we go? Like this could have taken people 100 hours if we would have gone deeper. So we We now know who's doing the content. We can go back to them and explore those types of questions. Does that make sense, Tasha? Is that sort of where we saw the trajectory?
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, just to build on that, I'll just build in one more point. You're absolutely right. So we provided everyone with a question, and people interpreted that question in their own context, and they said yes or no. We're doing that or we're not. We leave it up to Luminary, of course. There's a lot of work still to be done to connect with those business schools to learn more about exactly what does that mean for you and what else could you be doing. And the one that we discussed quite a bit was actually the response to TRC, and the wording in the questionnaire was, is there a formalized response to TRC? Who knows what that actually means? So there's a formal response. They've done something and deliberately in recognition of the TRC calls to action, but it could have been just a formal statement, a press release, or it could have been actually something that was very action oriented. We put in place courses or something else. But who knows really what that formal response is? So there's still a lot of work to be done to try and understand in a practical, real world way what these business schools are actually doing.
Here's an example, Derek, of knowledge mobilization. So we can now go to you folks that said, yes, we responded to TRC. We can ask you for that response. And now for people that say and get to the point where they go, you know, we would like to develop a TRC response. We would like to develop a calls to action strategy. We have templates, we have people, we have examples that you can network with, and it will accelerate your work doing what these folks sort of led the way in terms of TRC. What's the next question in the chat?
Not
Hi,
a
Cafu. I see us. Next one.
Oh, sorry, not a question, more of a comment from our friend David Deephouse. So mentioning that Luminary could work with Administrative Science Association of Canada to accelerate partnerships and research collaboration. So very happy to announce that we do have a formal partnership with ASAC. We are going to be working very closely with them to co-create the Indigenous Colloquium that will be happening in conjunction with their annual conference that will take place in Calgary next May. So we're really excited about that, and looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, David. And I think there was one more comment about the time. Oh, go ahead.
Just hang on to this one. Tasha, can you just elaborate on our work? So Terri Lynn touched on, we have a partnership. Andre Laplume is the president of ASAC. And another development with ASAC, talk about the Indigenous Business Division that's going to roll out.
Yes, so there is a new Indigenous Business Division. It has been formally recognized. We had about 50 people show up already. And so looking forward to next year's ASAC for any submissions to our division, where we'll be having our own separate part of the conference to engage in research, discussion, and collaborations together.
Exciting. And one more comment was just asking about the time for the October 15th webinar so that you can add it to your calendar. So it's 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So same time as today. We're looking to have a consistent cadence with these meetings. So they'll be every third Thursday of the month at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So you can count on that. All right, so are there any other questions for us? We're right on time. I just want to share a little bit of feedback. I'm not as technical as I'd like to be, so I can't prop my screen up, but some of the insights from the poll, the question was, the insights and findings provided me with new knowledge. That's part of what we're trying to do, is to increase knowledge amongst those that we're working with in terms of Indigenous engagement across the business schools. So we have 53% that said that they strongly agree. There's 40% that agree, and then 7% that are neutral. So thank you for that.
That's good.
Okay, well, any last comments from the panel before we close this up for today? And thank you everybody for your great comments in the chat. Really appreciate you taking the time to say where you're from, and hope that we do see you online on following our Luminary networks, or at our next webinar.
I think the closing comment for me is, having completed this survey, working and getting the working group together, we're going to be able to now do more webinars just on this topic. What are we saying about curriculum? What are we saying about research? And so watch for that. But it's going to build from you, the partners, participating in these networks, whether it's research, whether it's in curriculum and pedagogy. And I think the shout out that Terri Lynn gave to our partner McGill University and to the Desautol Faculty of Management, that is going to be the host of the second annual Indigenous Innovation Summit. So he'll be a chance to meet in person with these networks, with students. And I'll give you one other finding I forgot to put in this slide. How many business schools have an Indigenous Business Student Association? Take a guess. 7. 6 are active. So we're bringing those Indigenous business student leaders together. We've already started the outreach by reaching out to the deans. Number 2, we're going to bring them together as a network. Number 3, they will be coming. We're going to bring them together. We already have some funding sponsors. Royal Bank, thank you very much. And we're looking at some others. And we will be bringing those students into a student forum at McGill when we do the Innovation Summit. So watch for more happening with Indigenous Business Student Network and Indigenous Research Network. So again, the baseline has allowed us to sort of start that connection and that work. For those of you that would like to start an Indigenous Business Student Association, there's going to be some recipes for quick knowledge mobilization, and you can do R&D, which is rob and duplicate.
First time I hear that one. So I gained some new insights and knowledge today, Kelly. Thank you for that. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.